Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to talk about a brand new Terramaster. More precisely, I want to talk about that. This is the T9-450, and it's another solution from the brand that frankly still carries the moniker of being the budget solution in the industry, but still nonetheless leaves me looking at the hardware going, why is no one else doing this? One of the reasons I continue to talk about Terramaster here on the channel, other than the fact you guys ask about them, is simply that a lot of the time when it comes to the hardware, they just provide more than anyone else. I'm not going to say that TOS, their software, their NAS software that arrives with their system, is as evolved as the likes of DSM and QTS and True NAS and stuff like that, but I will say that in terms of hardware, what you're getting for your buns is often uncomparable in the NAS industry as far as a turnkey outbox solution goes. Now, the T9-450 knocks around, depending on where you are, for about $1,000. Currently, at the time of recording, it was listed for $1,199, about 1,050 quid, and again, about 1,100 to 1,199 euros, depending on where you are. Now, for that, you get a 9-bay ready-built system. It's got a quad-core Intel CPU inside, it's got 8 gig of memory, and it's got two, count them, two 10 GBE ports there on the rear. It's even got a couple of 2.5 GBE ports on the rear. It's got M2 NVMe support inside as well, Gen 3, and again, 9 bays of storage and a fluid RAID system. What the actual seriously, I'm just impressed by the sheer level of hardware. And in today's video, I'm going to make it straight with you. We're not going to have the benchmarks or the software section of this video. One, because I'm still trying to get enough media to fully populate this. I've got a bunch of 14 TB Seagates, I've got some Skyhawk drives, and I've also got some Ultrastar drives. I do not have 9 different drives of a high enough capacity and performance level to fully test this. I will be taking advantage in the benchmarking in a follow-up video on multi-channel, on SMB, on a local system directly connected on my Windows system. I will also be looking at TOS, the latest version, 5.1.3, with the extra additions there, such as improved 4K decoding on a dedicated TOS 5.1.3 video, but they're not going to be featured in this video. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer on. This video is largely going to be about the hardware, but we will touch on the software capabilities too. But for now, let's get this out of the retail box here, shall we? Again, they've gone for that box. This is the third, I believe, 9-bay box from them we've reviewed on the channel in about 14 months. If we have a look while we get inside, we can have a little look. Again, pretty big there. This case they go for there. Very similar to a standard PC case, but a modified one. I would argue, as I said in my T9-423 review, the case that this arrives with is kind of like a rack mount style desktop chassis. We'll get to that in a moment though. We've got our accessories inside. We receive, come on, give me the screwdriver. We've got the external power cable. The system has a single internal PSU, a 250 watt PSU inside there. Again, why I'm saying about it being single is because when you see it, it's basically a rack mount, but not. We have a Cat 6E cable there, and this is a copper one there, and that's going to become important later on. We have got the Terramaster screwdriver they always include. I've got about 5 of these dotted around the home and office now, and they're probably one of my favourite screwdrivers. I think more for nostalgia than anything else. We've got additional rubber feet for the system. That's because although it arrives with rubber feet on board, you can replace them and change them around, but also you can side profile this device as well. That's where the additional feet will come in, but bear in mind about the cooling. But again, more on that later. We've got screws for 2.5 inch and 3.5 inch media. Information inside on the 2 years manufacturer's warranty, which again, I'm a little disappointed by. I'd have thought if any of their systems were going to come with 3 years warranty, they would have gone for these business class systems. This is not a home system. It's a grand. I would have expected 3 years of warranty, but so be it. Again, more information on first time setup, quick installation, and just warnings really about some of the components that are used in some of the regions. But there's also a lot more talk about the memory sticks that Terramaster are stating people should use, because although the system has got 8 gig of memory by default, it can be upgraded to 32 gig. But they are being very insistent about people utilising their own memory. Now, again, it's not unusual. The NAS industry does it. There's a brand over here that is very insistent about utilizing their own RAM modules, but still nonetheless, I'm surprised that Terramaster is kind of pulling that one a little bit. I get why on some of their systems, when they've been recommending 32 gig of memory, utilizing some Intel CPUs that are not supposed to use more than 16, I could understand if they're using very specific modules within their own bracket that they may have tailored in some way, who knows. But I'm surprised they're pulling that proprietary memory stuff, given their position in the NAS industry, as it stands at least. Also, we have, let me get this out of there, a very firm bit of foam there protecting the device. We've got one of these on the top, one of these in the bottom with the device inside. Another big additional layer of foam. So again, plenty of protection. An area that I would argue a lot of brands kind of cut the old corners there in terms of the budget. And if we get the device out of there, we have got this system. Now bear in mind, just to give that protection a little bit of perspective there, that's how big the box it came in was. That is how much foam and protection this system's arriving with. I'll put that door back on that now. So let's take a little closer look at this system. Let's find out where the opening point for this bag is. There at the bottom. Sorry about the banging there, quite close to the mic. Again, as I say, this is the third 9-bay from Terramaster I've reviewed, so I'm familiar with this chassis, but I still absolutely love it. Have a little look. There is that chassis there. We've got those 9 bays of storage there tucked there on the front, all lots of ventilation. Further ventilation there on the side over all of them. There's the rubberized feet, but again, as mentioned, even though this is a desktop tower and it's smaller than a normal desktop PC by a few inches in each dimension, but you can also mount it as a desktop rack mount-esque side profile system, hence the additional feet there. You don't have to do it that way, but I quite like it in this shape and form. You wouldn't put a monitor on top of it, and certainly if you tried to mount it that way, which is what it sort of indicates by the placement there of each of the individual logos. Still, nonetheless, I'm not overtly keen with the fans being on the bottom so close with the air pushing out. I kind of like that maybe on the side. But the chassis itself I do particularly like. I like the fact that they've managed to get these 9 bays inside there. 9 is a quirky little number. They could have gone with an 8. I believe one of their other systems is a 9-bay chassis with 8 SATA bays inside. But I do like this chassis design. It's metal all the way around. It doesn't feel cheap. That's the other thing I like about the chassis. It does not feel cheap. We will be getting the side panel off as well later on to show you the internal layout. But let's talk a little bit more about the design of the ventilation there. If we go for the trays, they are metal trays, not click and load. You will have to utilise those screws that are included. It is spring loaded as well, and the ventilation goes all the way through. There's additional passive ventilation both on this side with the active airflow going out, but and it's a 3 rear fan system. You can see additional ventilation there built on the inside of those cavities going into a cable-free SATA connection there at the back. There's no front-mounted USB, which kind of surprises me, and indeed when it comes to USB, you've got a couple of USB ports there on the rear, and we'll talk more about those ports later on, but they're USB 3.2 Gen 1, so 5 gigabits per second, which is a little disappointing. Maybe a limitation of the CPU that we'll talk about later on. But overall, the design is surprisingly compact for such a large system there. Let's get these trays back in there, which is probably easier if I look at what I'm doing to get those trays back in. Power button there at the top. No LCD panel. Something Terramaster have never really entertained, the whole idea of the LCD panel for real-time information, which is a shame, because although a lot of their systems, not including this one, do have HDMI output that isn't really realised outside of utilising it for diagnostics or installing a different OS. I think having some sort of visual interface at a glance on this, other than obviously the LEDs on the front, would have been quite nice. They're not lockable trays either, which again is more for prone accidental than malicious theft protection. But I would have thought a system at this caliber would have had maybe even just lockable keys or some sort of locking dynamic, but there isn't really anything to stop accidental removal. And because they're partially spring loaded, that does mean that accidental removal is, you know, even by a few percent more likely. Again, ventilation running all the way through on those panels from the 3 fans there on the rear. And if we take a closer look at the back, we start discussing those ports and connections, because I'll be straight with you, I quite like what I'm seeing here. So if we get the dull stuff out the way, we've got that PSU as mentioned. It's an internal 250 watt PSU. Also, we have got those USB ports there at 5 gigabits per second. And again, fair play to them, given that all of their systems up to this point, all in the last 18 months or so, have been 10 gig USB. They've actually labelled them as 5 gig, so no one feels lied to. There's a console network port there, which I'm kind of weirdly surprised is on here. I guess, again, diagnostic, get round the overall network to do your troubleshooting there. But the real stars of the show are these ones up here. We'll bring that closer. So just second from the top, just there, we've got our two 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports there. So that means that we're going to be able to take advantage of 250 to 279 megs on each of them. And again, taking advantage of things like link aggregation on a supported switch, port trunking and the like, or SMB multi-channel will result in you getting some fantastic feeds, either directly interface to interface. Again, you are going to have to make sure your OS supports it, your Windows 11s and such, or via a supported switch. You're going to get some great bandwidth. We're still talking about 9 SATA bays of storage though, whether you're going to use a RAID 5 or a RAID 6 or their own flexible T-RAID, which allows you to mix and match drives, something I'm hopefully going to be utilising when I benchmark this for the next video. But still nonetheless, those 2.5 GBEs are still going to bottleneck those 9 drives, which is why it's great news that there at the top we've got 2 10 GBE SFP connections there. SFP, so fibre, although not as convenient as your standard 10G base T, still means that here we have got the potential for 20 gigabits of external connectivity. Yes, it's SFP, so you're going to need either DAC pre-attached transceiver cables, which can prove quite expensive, or you're going to have to get your standard SC cables and FC cables and get those connected in with pre-existing transceivers. Now, the good news is you can get SFP to RJ45 converters. They cost you about 120 to about 200 nicker, depending on whether you're going to go for an Optrix or you're going to go for the Mellanox type ones, but you still have the option to patch in copper based 10 GBE into this system. You're just going to have to spend somewhere between 300 to 400 nicker on a couple of those transceivers to go inside that will convert it over to copper away from fibre. But we are talking about a 9-base system, so even if you installed SATA SSDs in this, let's say you went nuts and put in some 2 to 4 TB SATA SSDs to take care of the NAND and get the real performance, even if theoretically you could max out every one of those SATAs, which you're never going to max 6 gig SATA, or even with an SSD, there'll be that friction. But say you went 550 there on the 9 bays of storage there, you've got 25 gigabit Ethernet here to play with, depending on your managed switch setup or taking advantage of direct interfaces with multiple machines. That is a huge degree of storage performance throughput that this is opening the door to you for. So again, at that price point of around a grand is a lot of money. Let's give it the respect it deserves. £1,000, dollars, euros, quid. But still, nonetheless, for what you are getting in this hardware environment and NAS market right now, it's very, very desirable and impressive. Now, if we get our super special Terramaster screwdriver, we can get the side of this puppy off and take a little look and discussion about the internal hardware inside this. Because I do actually have a couple of question marks that I'm hoping that either my benchmarking next time or my TOS 513 review will cover if we utilize this system to do so, although I might use an Intel based system just because of that decoding that's been added, the improved decoding in the latest update. If we remove that side panel like a normal PC, nice and metal, do bear in mind this is not going to be quite in operation, by the way. Inside we can take a good long look at the hardware architecture. Let's bring that closer to camera, and again there should be an article linked below over on NAS Compares, but we can take a little look at that hardware architecture. So let's go through this bit by bit. Let's bring that closer to camera for you and try not to hit the mic. Again, there'll be better images below over on the blog. We've got that PSU that we talked about earlier on. So we can talk about this enormous CPU block heatsink there, so it doesn't take advantage of active cooling, but there is still the 3 fans on the rear. That CPU inside there is an Intel Atom-based processor. It's the C3558R. It's a quad-core 2.4 gigahertz processor. Doesn't have integrated graphics, but it is a Gen 3 processor there with 20 lanes within the chipset, the CPU, to play with overall. That CPU is going to be good for running some of those databases there, the virtual operations there with the VMs. Just bear in mind that this is not going to be multimedia focused NAS. It would have been nice to see an Intel version of this, like the T9-423 with a PCIe upgrade. Sadly, that isn't available there. I think there will be a contingent of users that maybe would have wanted a PCI slot instead of the 10Gs. I personally think, given the huge amount of bandwidth focus there that's been afforded to those, I'm prepared to cut it some damn slack. Atom CPUs, of course, quite a few years ago were getting quite a bad rep in terms of server utilization due to unexpected failures. I think most of the Atoms have lost that now. I know Synology sort of moved away from the Atom series to move over towards those embedded AMD Ryzens. QNAP continued utilizing a lot of their CUPE systems as well, started utilizing the newer generation Atom and this Atom as well. But that CPU is also combined with our memory in there, so we've got a single gig of Terramaster 8 gig DDR4 memory down there, and again upgradable over 2 slots up to 32 gig maximum. But on top of that, we've got our 2 M2 slots here inside, and those 2 M2 slots inside there, I might be wrong, but I think they might be 22110 length. Again, not 100% certain, but another thing I want to discuss just a little bit, and trust me, when I do my benchmarking, I'm going to take a look. Look there at the top. There is an available PCIe slot up there. I am very curious what that PCIe slot is going to do. Now, it's a ×4. I'm assuming it's a Gen 3 ×4, given the architecture of this system. I don't think they would have gone to the trouble to attach it if it's not going to be usable, and certainly there's absolutely nowhere within that backplane that I'm going to be able to take advantage of that PCIe slot. But nonetheless, I quite like that it's there, and I am intrigued what I'm going to be able to do with that when I'm doing my benchmarking and experiments with it. Talking of experiments, a number of you that follow the channel probably know that this USB that's inside is how the TOS software is installed. This has got the TOS 5.1 installer inside, and this is what runs the TOS, at least from the outset. When the system boots up, it checks that USB, and then afterwards we'll check the drives for an existing Terramaster installation. But of course, as we've seen previously, you don't have to do that. You can remove that USB if you choose, pop it to one side, get your USB that's got Terramaster, TrueNAS on it, Unraid, Proxmox, OpenMedia Vault, any of a number of different third-party OS, pop it inside there, and boom, this Terramaster system no longer is going to run TOS. It's going to run your operating system of choice. Again, Unraid, TrueNAS, and more. So that's another reason why, when I talk about this in terms of the hardware, why I'm so damn impressed by the architecture of this system, and also that I keep making videos of Terramaster NASes getting hacked and modded and taken apart, but still nonetheless they go ahead and send one like this. So I think that sort of implies they're okay with it, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe they'll try and take down this video. But overall, I'd say in terms of hardware architecture, although that CPU isn't going to float everyone's boat, remember it's a 4-thread, 4-core CPU as well there, I think there's a lot to be said for the system's hardware capabilities. Now, I will say, as mentioned earlier on, I'm not going to go out of my way to talk about the software too much. The reason being that I've already done several reviews and testings in the past of TOS in different videos where I've done reviewing of their hardware as well as the system and platform as a whole. Indeed, some of the innovations that have rolled out in TOS 5 are pretty darn significant. That said, I do think for those of you that are unfamiliar with Terramaster's TOS platform and are users of other NAS platforms that have sort of looked at the hardware on a system like the 450 here and wondered, let me tell you a little bit about it. Right, so it runs it's an EXT or BTRFS file system choice at setup there. You've got the usual RAID configuration to choose from, but you've also got their Fluid RAID system that is comparable to Drobo's Beyond RAID or Synology's Hybrid RAID. In other words, it allows you to mix and match drives and take advantage of larger drives either on day one or later on. Say in this 9 bay, you put 4 TBs in it, and 2 or 3 years from now you want to start adding 10 and 20 TBs you saw on sale, you can do that. It will absorb the larger drives. It just needs to factor in one of the larger drive. Now, T-RAID does have a slight performance dip compared with that of traditional RAID configurations like RAID 5 and RAID 6, but still nonetheless, a lot of users are prepared to put up with that small modicum of drop in performance to take advantage of the customization and flexibility of that T-RAID system. Now, Terramaster was one of the brands that were targeted by ransomware a couple of years ago. Again, as I say, they're not alone. QNAP, Acer Store, and even third-party platforms that were doing just software on their own were targeted, whatever, regardless of what was Linux vulnerabilities or backdoors that were left open in software by some developers, either in error or otherwise. So the Terramaster platform is still kind of nursing the bruises just a little bit there after being targeted by those attacks. But I think most users looking at Terramaster are starting to look at that system as an offline-only system, or using third-party VPN-based remote access. Again, Tailscale being a fantastic example. When it comes to applications and services in the first and third party, I will say that although Terramaster have improved a lot of their applications and competitive AAA services, such as having their own AI photo recognition tool in there and improvements in container applications, it has to be said that the bulk of the mainline applications are going to be third-party supported in their own app center or using their own third-party community supported forum that they're running at the moment, where people are modding slowly existing third-party installers to run within the Terramaster platform here. It's a shame it doesn't have HDMI output, but then at the same time, Terramaster's own software doesn't really let you realize that right now. It's just not the end of the world. They've certainly tightened a lot of their security on their system, the defaults when you set it up, and they've even got that isolation mode, which I've still yet to find on another brand. There is a one-click button in the control panel that allows you to not only sever any kind of remote access, including Tailscale, your team viewers or the like, but on top of that, disable any non-certified applications, any third-party applications that basically kill off any remote PHP level access to the system by the click of that button, that can only be re-enabled upon a restart. So if you do try to turn it on, the whole system has to be restarted. So that means that if you are able to sever that connection, no one outside of the system's local area are going to be able to re-establish remote connections without a restart, and ultimately to further layer the amount of difficulty an external attacker will have to try and re-establish a connection. Now, there was a surveillance application in the beta of TOS 5. I think they kind of stepped back from that. In the beta, it was a beta. It felt really alpha more than beta, to be frank with you. But still, nonetheless, the rest of the applications, like the centralized backup tools there and the snapshot tools as well, have improved, along with the improved kernel management of the GUI that you're accessing all the time. Overall, I would say in terms of hardware, this thing is incredibly impressive, what you're getting for the money when you compare it against other NAS brands in the market. Now, you could maybe try to build something like this yourself. You could get a PC case, get 9 caddies, buy that CPU. It is a server class CPU, so you might have to kind of deviate a bit there, get 8GB memory, a couple of 10G SFPs, 2.5GB ports. You'd probably end up spending something like 600 to maybe 700 nicker. Maybe, again, as mentioned in other videos, you could go real tangent and go to like an AliExpress, go for one of those CWWK boxes like the 6-bay box that we went for. And again, that was about 450, and that was a 2.5G x 4 port there. But I think to get something built like this pre-built, and with those ports and connections in a native way, and I still want to find out what that additional PCIe slot is, I think you'd be very hard pushed to get a better value system than this. But once you factor in the time of ordering the bits, the mixed warranty of everything that you're getting there, the building it yourself, the trial and error, I think for a system like this that is turnkey, even on a hardware only factor on its own, is still pretty darn impressive. Once you roll in the TOS software, whether you're going to utilize TOS in this system as your primary NAS, or bolstering an existing hybrid cloud system, or as another backup layer to an existing NAS, it's still even further impressive that that's rolled in with the price there. The TOS software, as I mentioned in the intro, isn't as evolved as some of the other NAS brands that are out there, but it has accelerated very, very quickly. And even now, it's still pretty darn impressive when you start utilizing it there. You don't believe me? Just check out the review or hold tight for the follow-up videos on this system. But this has been my hardware review of the T9-450. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. If you want to learn more about this, again, there should be a written review over on NAS Compares. If not live now, then very, very soon. We will be doing the benchmarking on this because I do want to see whether that CPU and this hardware architecture can actually crank out 2x10G on this system thanks to that CPU within this build architecture within TOS. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, if there are other tests that you want to see or comparisons for this, let me know in the comments. Again, stay tuned for the TOS 5.1.3 review as well when that arrives. If you need help with your NAS solution, go into the comments and you will find links to the free advice support area on NAS Compares, along with the free community forum at Ask NAS Compares, and of course there is the Discord. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.